Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this board meeting of Ebbsfleet Development Corporation. We're here in a very sunny Ebbsfleet. Thank you for joining us. Why don't we get on with today's business? We've got a busy agenda. Can I just start? Do we have any apologies for absence, please, James?
We have apologies from Councillor Kite today. We are expecting John Burns to attend the meeting.
Can I just add, Chair, I spoke to Jeremy earlier in the week and he was very keen to reassure the board that he's still very enthusiastic and pushing to the full participant. Apologises for missing a number of meetings due to elections, and I think there is possibly a Kent leader which is had to attend.
Yeah, look, I can understand why Kent leaders meeting who want to be there at that. Does coincide with a question from the public about appointment of people onto the board, so I'm sure Jeremy will be here next time. Very quickly, I'd like to welcome Paul Abrahams, Director of Infrastructure and Enabling, who has joined us. Paul, perhaps can I just ask you quickly, just to give a little bit on your background and your experience?
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone. Paul Abrahams. So I joined EDC on the 10th of May. So I've been here just over a month, and the team have fully welcomed me into their open arms, so to speak. So that's been very much appreciated. My background is very much engineering and project management. So I started my career in the Royal Engineers and then into the construction industry in 1989. And I progressed up to regional director level for several tier 1 contractors, regional contracting across the southeast. Primarily Waits, Kier and Vinci Construction. Yes, very much looked at the opportunity to join a client organisation. I've been connected to this master plan prior to coming to EDC. So when the opportunity arose on LinkedIn, I kind of jumped at it with full sort of effort, and yeah, was very lucky to secure the position. So that's what's kind of brought me here.
Great. Well, look, it's good to have you on board. You've got a very important job with the team. Wish you the very best of luck. Your success is our success.
Thank you very much. No, very much appreciated.
Right. We also have observing us, Aman Dalvi. He is leading a board effectiveness review of the board of the Ebbsfleet Development Corporation. That is something which our sponsor department and indeed the Cabinet Office like to be done for all arm's length bodies. One can always strive to be better. So, Aman, good to see you. Look forward to your report in due course, and I hope you enjoy the meeting. Otherwise, moving back through business today, any declarations of interest other than the standing declarations we have for board members who are also on our planning committee? Anything incremental to that? John, welcome. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Sorry for being late.
Don't worry, just going through the formalities. All right, then no further declarations of interest. Then we have the part 1 minutes of our board meeting of the 3rd of May in front of us, as always, very thorough. Does anyone have any comments on those, or people happy that they represent a true and fair record of the meeting that we had?
Yes. One very small issue in minute 3.4. In the last sentence where it says Mark also said that homes continue to be more popular than apartments. I think it should be houses more popular than apartments. Apartments can be homes as well.
It's an important point of clarification.
I think it is.
Great. Okay. Made that necessary amendment, and the worst expression is units, which we don't like at all. Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. So I will take it. Yes, Nick.
One other point was whether there was an update on the feedback on state service charges.
Why don't we take that a little later, perhaps, Ian, if you can do that.
Which is the minute, Nick, that you're referring to? So I can just look it up and
Got my papers.
okay.
There was a specific comment from Councillor Burden, who commented that 2 developers had left the area because the cost of estate service charges making their development model for adoption of roads and similar unsustainable.
Yeah, indeed. I think we all remember that discussion we had at the last board meeting.
And it was taken up to say that feedback would be given.
All right. Good. Thank you for that one, Nick. So I'm going to assume that everyone's happy with the minutes and they are duly approved. Then very quickly, we have actions following on from that. Fine. Are there any points which, Ian, you'd like to draw out?
No, I think we're still waiting. And then in terms of the first action there, we're still waiting for pins, I think, aren't we, Mark?
We are. There was an update provided on Monday from pins to say that it was still on their to-do list.
And then the other two items are due to be in July.
All right, great. Thank you very much for that, Ian. Then we have our forward look there. That then, I think, brings us into the first paper of today, Chief Executive Part 1 update. Ian, please.
Thank you. Not too much in addition to say out of my paper. I'd like to make my welcome to Aman, who's here today to undertake the review. We'll be interviewing board members, members of the senior executive team, including myself, and some of the sponsor partners. So very welcome to yourself. Just to note that we have agreed, Simon's agreement to take part in the a further round of the board apprentice programme. So that's it's been a positive experience for us. I hope it's been a positive experience for Izzy. Yeah, so I think that's a really good thing that the board is doing to support that. And I suppose I would just dwell a little bit on 5.1 regarding staffing capacity, where I've noticed that there have been some sort of issues, and we're facing capacity constraints, particularly in the development directions and corporate services teams, due to some resignations, a small number, but we're a small team, so one or two staff affected, maternity leave, etc., all been affected those. As a result, the teams have been working extremely hard to keep on top of work, and we are looking with the directors at how we can bring additional resource in on a flexible basis, whether that's staff, permanent staff, or in some cases short-term contracting and consultancy support. So we have included this and increased its level of risk. Hopefully it will be short-term because we are recruiting for roles, but yeah, inevitably when you lose a member of staff, there's very often a gap, and even a 2 or 3 months gap at the pace that we're trying to move things can be quite telling. So I won't say anything else, but happy to take any questions.
All right. Before I bring everyone in, Izzy, how long have you been with us? How long will you be with us until the end?
6 months. Been with you and here until December.
Okay,
1
great.
year program.
How have you found it?
Really interesting.
Right. Good. All right. Well, look, we're delighted that we're going to be participating again in the programme. Thank you for being here. Any questions or comments, observations on Ian's paper, board? Yes, Neil.
Just one, Simon. On staffing and capacity, if you don't have people at the post, might be an impact on functions and performing them, and there might also be an impact on other staff who have to cover.
Yep. And
it was really on that second point. How are you sharing the burdens, and are you coping, or do you think you need to get in temporary help?
Yeah, and where we need to, so you're absolutely right, then, because we have very conscientious staff, and where gaps appear, we have been filling in and carrying some of that burden. It's up to all of us as the senior leadership team and managers to very carefully monitor the work of all of our staff. You know, I'm in that situation as well. I've got people reporting to me where those strains are being felt, and have been managing that to relieve some of that strain. And all of us as directors have been dealing with that over the last couple of months. We do look, as I said in my intro, to take a flexible approach to resourcing. So Mark's team, for example, they have used agencies to get planners in. Gerard's directorate, again, use of some agency staff to fill temporary gaps whilst recruiting as well. So yes, I mean, as I say, I hope it's sort of short term, and we're not talking about significant numbers, but we are a small team, so you know, small numbers make a big difference. And yeah, it does just place an extra burden on other.
Just on that, to dimension this, how many FTEs are we talking about and where in?
Or what's our current complement?
No, well, how many people are we down? How many FTEs?
How many vacancies have we currently got? 5, 6?
Several roles being recruited to, another
Yeah.
4 adverts going out on Friday, so there's quite a few.
We've appointed a number of people, 4 or 5 that we're waiting to start.
Yeah.
And we've appointed them there, but there's that gap still. So
Yeah.
somebody's still picking up and then we've got another 4 roles, as James said. So, and some of those that have gone out, we're trying to get ahead of the game. The people are still here, but we're trying to get out. You know,
So around 15 to 20% FTE headcount, turnover, stroke 10% still vacant. So it's material.
It is, yeah. Hence raising it.
I think we ought to recognise that it does place additional burdens on people and express the board's support and gratitude for those who've taken up the slack.
Thank you indeed, and I think we have got a paper which
Yes,
evidence that later on.
I know that.
Yeah, Valerie.
You've probably already thought of this, but what about outsourcing and just doing things differently? And I would have thought there's more likelihood of achieving corporate services, not across the board, some of them, whether it's HR or what have you. But even in development work, and certainly district council and all over the country, people are outsourcing to consultants for planning support and so on.
Yeah, so we do that, Valerie. So our HR service is outsourced. We've just re-procured that actually in the last couple of months, and we look very flexibly, as I say, in the planning resource. Mark looks at agency staff, contact people we know that are freelancing and can come in and support. And so, yeah, we do take quite a flexible approach to, and we have a framework for project and program management, for example, recently again procured. So we take quite a flexible approach.
All right. I think we've had a good conversation there. It's an important issue. I know we get updated in the papers on recruitment, so perhaps just keep us fully abreast of this. Thank you very much, Ian. That paper was just for noting. Don't think there's anything else there. Thank you. Caroline, can we move on to the second paper, marketing and communications?
Afternoon all. I will take the paper as read and just a few key updates from me. This month we have been focusing on updating our site, drone, videography and photography to showcase the development of the area over the last year. These are currently being edited, but we've got some really fantastic shots, particularly of the green spaces, the Platinum Jubilee Park and the open pathway across the bridge on the lake. So that will be shared and that will just be a valuable asset for all of our marketing and promotional endeavours. We're also looking at using the assets collected from this to develop another video, moving from the success of the recruitment video that we developed towards the end of last year. We're looking to add another video asset to showcase our vision in Ebbsfleet, and we're just exploring opportunities to bring that in line with the new website. In May, we held a community board taster session, which we had positive turnout. I believe Kevin will be covering that in his paper, so I won't steal his thunder. But that performance was particularly positive, in line with our paid promotions across social media, and exploring different and innovative opportunities to engage with community members. This is then acting as a springboard to community board recruitment, which is taking place this month and into early July. We're also working on embedding an interactive map. The current developers of the website have offered some really exciting concepts and ideas to embed an interactive map directly into our new website, which is a particularly cost-effective solution, considering some of the costly platforms that we have previously explored. But this is a work in progress. So we'll see the feasibility, make sure that it meets our needs. But I think that's a really positive step from the ECG to really adapt flexibly and be able to meet our growing and changing needs. To preempt a question, we are still in line for a July go live. It's moving along really positively. I've seen a draft of the website code and it's all looking really great. Community drop-in sessions are also taking place across Ebbsfleet. Again, Kevin will cover this in his paper, but we are complementing this with paid social media campaigns and compiling some marketing resources for community members that is acting as an FAQ database for residents. So it's just making sure that we stay on top of responding to proportionate community concerns and making sure that we are able to put a face to how we can support and how we can signpost to developers to answer kind of emergent concerns and questions. We have launched our digital newsletter, which I believe I mentioned in last board. To date, we have utilised the platform to deliver 3 segmented communications campaigns. And by segmented, I mean that they're targeted contacts. So making sure that we maintain relationships with members of the public who attended the community board taster session, so that we can tap into their interest now that we're into the community board recruitment phase, and also engaging with the placemaking contact databases around social value and upskilling and generating employment opportunities for the local workforce. So I've been working with Kevin's team again to help drive that and deliver that forward. And finally, from me, next month, I would like to take updated corporate photos of you all to appear on our website. So that's just a note that there will be a photographer here in July to take a photo of you all so that we can have some consistent imagery for our new website. So if you're happy for me to, there'll be someone here to take your picture. And that's it from me.
Caroline, thank you. Daniel, no Ermin. Very fulsome report. There's definitely been a step change in our communications. So looking forward to the new website. Board, any observations, questions?
I just welcome the interactive mapping. If we can get that working, it'd be an excellent addition to the website. Really important in terms of marketing what we're doing. So yeah, delighted to hear the progress on that.
Great. Valerie.
Thank you. I was really interested in the social value report and the various links and so on. And it's great to see, how do we measure the impact there, which is different from just say the numbers attending a training course or what have you. I mean, what are our key objectives around that? And how do we know that we are achieving them? I should know this, but perhaps I don't. But I mean, do we do ESG reporting? How do we literally get a understanding of social return on our investment and the impact?
Do you want me?
Well,
in terms of in direct response to my report, I work with Lara, who delivers on inclusive growth. She's our inclusive growth manager. She's probably best placed to answer those questions. In terms of the newsletters that we've sent out, this is about really generating engagement from our developers to tap into our local workforce and then have that real practical transition between digital engagement and feasible engagement. I would invite Ian to finish that answer.
I mean, there's the framework that we decided to use, the platform we decided to use has a whole series of measures, and it's all about measuring the impact. I mean, I don't know whether perhaps when Laura comes for her next update report, which she does every 6 months, we would include something about that. With Mark, you want to say any more?
We do have some initial outputs from the social value portal, which is the just program that pulls all of this together. There are some outputs that we're looking to sort of sort of publish and share. I think Laura's due to come back in October, November time, once we've then had sort of a proper year of that portal in action. So then hopefully we can get some proper conclusions at that stage. So yeah, she'll come back there so she can take some questions.
Simon, is this something that we could come back to in future then, please? It's important, isn't it, really? This kind of demonstrates the value of the government investment in some ways other than housing numbers.
Yeah, look, indeed. I'm just wondering about how we measure this. We report and measure this.
Yes, there are the platform we signed up to has, and we chose some specific measures from their basket of things that you can use, which was most relevant to our particular activities here. That data has all been collected on the portal. So the reason why we suggested coming back in October and November is it's relatively new. We're in the first year. So we wanted to have some data that was going to tell us something about a year's performance rather than a shorter period of time. So we definitely will be coming back. We will be providing that report. The timescale is sort of October, November when it's been running a year. So.
Great.
All right, so we'll get a paper in October, November. All right, excellent, good question. Right, Caroline, thank you very much for that. I think that's your report is for noting. Thank you very much for all the hard work. Then Mark, planning, design and delivery report.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So the usual update from me. So the next committee, we're scheduling for July. Various sort of pre-application presentations and made items are planned for that. Generally, it feels like there's been a high number of submissions, and we've got quite a lot that's live. A lot of that's been down to a particular date around Northfleet Embankment West. So the area where Bellway is delivering Harbour Village, that residential scheme and the employment scheme next to it had a deadline of the submission of reserve matters by the 7th of June. So an awful lot came in at once, which means that there is quite now a lot on the books, and that will then lead through to some potential relatively sort of hefty committee agendas through the autumn. But we'll obviously program that in due course. 2.3 just covers just a quick update in terms of nominations. So following the local elections, we've heard from Dartford and Gresham around their local authority nominees. So that is have been passed to DLUC for Secretary of State approval. In 2.4, I'm asking board to approve revisions to the terms of reference for the planning committee. So there's a track change version in Annex A, then a clean version in Annex B, which I would like approval for, please. The main changes are listed under 2.4. Just to talk briefly about those. The first item relates to the ability for an objector or supporters to provide a short written statement, which can then be read out at committee. So that came in June 2020. It was the early days of the COVID pandemic. We were concerned about people not being able to access an only virtual meeting. So the way in which that was suggested to overcome, and various different authorities did this around the country, was the ability to then submit a statement and that to be read out. People obviously generally have been either attending committees in person, or they can obviously attend virtually anyway, and we do accept representations to be submitted on applications after the agendas are published. So it doesn't feel like that's necessary anymore. And then the second main item was really around clarification around EDC staff submitting applications, because we do have more staff that are local employees and local residents, and also we have a planning committee member that is also a local resident. So, and then to be consistent, we included board in that. So yeah, obviously happy to take any questions on that in a moment. Section 3, I mentioned a high number of applications in relation to Northfleet Embankment West in section 3.2. We are still expecting the application from Wester Hill Homes on Alcud and 5B. So there's an awful lot still coming through, an awful lot of developer interest still happening out there. So yeah, planning team are very busy. And then I suppose just, yeah, the only thing just to focus on, obviously housing delivery. We have had limited information, I'm afraid, again, from some of the developers So we've got the annual completions, 104 starts, sorry, and then 57 completions annually. But we will do a manual count for the end of the Q1 reporting for next month if we don't hear information back. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. John.
I'm pleased you mentioned on 2.3 the higher up representation on planning committees. Can I ask your assistance on this one, that we actually get them appointed within months, not years? That's why I've left, for example, Lauren as a substitute, because I think we went without representation for 18 months, 20 months, which is a bit rough, really. And I'm sure the government can work a bit quicker than that. And I may be biased, but that was unduly long. So I need your help on that one, please. And then obviously that would then solve that. On 2.4, I have no problem with proposals, but I was just wondering whether it would be possible for the elected ward members to make representation at the committee as well. The reason I have it that way around is at the moment you're forcing them to say whether they're in favour or opposing a scheme, whereas quite often they will come and advocate for the people who approach them, but don't necessarily want to come down on the line of opposing or supporting a project. And they can, we find, in Gratian, be quite balanced in their approach. They will set out the reasonings for and against, so they're representing local people, whilst they're not at the same time having to be a declared yes or no, which sometimes can actually help the project either get refused or permitted, depending on how the report's written up by officers. So it's only mirroring what we do, but I don't know if you find agreement to that.
All right, John, you make a couple of good points. I'll come back to this. Neil?
I had a question, but just on John's suggestion, planning committee. I think the committee could and would benefit from views from, obviously, from local representatives. It seems to me that we probably don't need to change the procedures, because at the moment we have a fairly strict 5 minutes each side. But there is a discretion. And I think that if a local ward member were to attend and to indicate they were going to attend, certainly if I was chairing the committee, I would be minded to say, yes, please contribute. But I don't think we need to actually change the procedures to achieve that. And I think the other thing is, if we did change the procedures, then there might be an expectation of ward members that they're expected to attend. And that's, but I'd be interested to hear how it works in Gravesham.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
So if a locally elected ward member wants to speak to an application, do they have to register to speak and will be given 3 minutes, or how does it run as a process?
So far, certainly when I've been chairing the committee, we haven't had that, apart from the fact that Lauren, who's a committee member, has represented views of her. That's a different chair. At the moment, you get your, I think it's 5 minutes each side.
And that's the applicant?
Well, applicant and those opposed, but the total is 5 minutes for each side. So if there's more than one person, they've got to come within the 5 minutes.
Right.
But this, I think, would be in addition. And the reason that I'm slightly, I don't think it's a good idea to have it formally in the process is A, it creates an expectation, and B, it might end up in 10 minutes of those opposed, and then the applicant will say, well, I'd like 10 minutes back to make it fair. So I'm just, but as I say, I'd be interested in how it works in Gravesham. But
John,
we have, as the hands of planning committee tonight, and any councillor can speak. What we have got is a unofficial rule that they're limited to 5 minutes each. Group leaders can speak longer because they tend to be verbose people. So we've built in a rule they can speak for a lot longer. But what in truth we find is very few members come and speak. They don't feel an obligation to come to meetings. They only do so if they're approached by a resident about something that directly affects them, invariably. So in Gratian's context, if you had an application that was in the town centre, you'd rarely get a councillor from a rural area turning up to speak on it, because it wouldn't be something they'd be contacted on. And in the context of the EDC, it would tend to be the 3 members who represent Northleet and Springhead, because they're the ones who directly run up against all the EDC projects and contracts. I would only expect those 3 normally to be the people who may show interest and actually then come along and speak. The evidence is you've already seen today, you haven't had people coming along. So that you're not, I don't suspect you're being bombarded with people. But we find integration does work. It does allow people to be represented by somebody they think may be more eloquent in a meeting and less prone to nervous to speak on their behalf. And we've never found a downside to it.
All right. Thank you very much, John. Derek.
Yeah, just perhaps add the way that it goes down at Dover with my DDC hat on. If when an application comes up, if you have say each person who wishes to speak to it, say oppose it, gets 3 minutes. So if you have 3 people opposing it, they get 9 minutes, and then the applicant gets 9 minutes to respond. If there's 4 people, 3 minutes each, that's 12 minutes. So the applicant gets 12 minutes. And that way seems to be quite fair, because the applicant then can sort of feel that they've had the sufficient time to answer all the various inquiries. So it's a multiplier, and it seems to work quite well.
All right. Thank you very much, Derek. Valerie?
So I want to support what colleagues are saying. I think it's a system that works really well. Sorry, we haven't talked about this in the past, but it does give confidence to people who are less able to present to themselves. I mean, clearly major housing developers have professionals on the line, but this is a planning service which will address all the applications. One thing though, Derek said it's sort of unlimited. It isn't. Certainly at Dover, the maximum is 3. So you would never get more than 3 times 3, or if you've got a single person, they would then have the 9 minutes to respond. But it does seem to work well, and somehow it feels more democratic, to be candid. I think it might really help the overall perception.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. There's nothing quite so contentious as planning. I'm going to bring Fred in first.
I'm very comforted by Neil's observation that the chair has flexibility in this regard. This seems to me to be something that the planning committee should organise in the first instance. I see no evidence that anyone's in practice being denied the ability to speak. I think we've got a very flexible chair. I'd be very content just to retain the present procedures. If we find that people are, we'll find that people are having the ability to speak, perhaps that the main board might take a view on it, but I just see no evidence that there's a problem that needs to be fixed at the moment. I can see there might be a theoretical problem, but I don't see a problem in practice at all. I'd be very happy to leave it to the chair's discretion.
Okay, right. Well, I think we have an excellent chair, so I think he will exercise his discretion in an appropriate way. I think I've been leader of a local authority, and I've seen many occasions when people would rather send along their elected representative to speak on their behalf, because sitting in planning committees isn't something they do every day of the week, and they can find it quite a threatening environment. So, I'm sure, Neil, you take all that into consideration. You're highly experienced professionally there. John, Valerie, I think we all want to ensure that there's democracy and democratically elected representatives get an opportunity to speak. So I'm sure you will knit that all together, Neil, if that's, and we'll achieve what we want to do. I've just got a couple of other questions on this before we come on to delivery. I guess the appointments team have probably little less than a month so far since they've got the suggested appointees to the planning committee. Can we sort of give them until the next board meeting in July? And if not, I think some kind of, happy to write to the appointments team. They do a great job, but trying to encourage them. My experiences can be very slow. It was in Lauren's case unacceptably slow. In your case, John, unacceptably slow. So I think we've got a lot of business coming through the planning committee. So if we could, the appointments team and the department don't get their in another board cycle, perhaps we can go forward to them. Maybe I can write to them to encourage them to do that. I've got a question here. I think where it says applications will be reported to planning committee, what does reported mean? This is in 2.4, let's say for an employee of the development corporation. What does it mean reported?
It means, sorry, 2.4. In the cover paper. It will be, yes, the all applications will then be reported to the committee for consideration for determination of.
Oh, right. So okay,
yes.
right. So if you're an employee with a relatively minor planning application that would otherwise be dealt with through delegated authority by the planning department,
yes, we felt
that's then going to be taken to a planning committee and determined by the planning committee.
Yes, previously the terms of reference actually said that if there was a major application submitted by a staff member, which seemed very unlikely for them to be submitting a major application for personal reasons. So, but yes, obviously there are local staff now. So if they wanted to put a conservatory in, for example, that would then be considered by the committee.
Okay, can I just ask a question here? Look, my experience on this was that, yeah, certainly where you had an elected councillor, all of their applications would go to a full planning committee. That's what used to happen in the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. Just wondering whether it's overreach for an employee who isn't an employee in the planning department. I just raised the question.
We could tighten it to be someone within the planning team, if that would help.
I don't know what the board feel, whether they think any employee of the development corporation should be subject to.
If an employee, a council application or member applies, they'll go in. Because then you've got transparency of.
So you have any employee of your local authority, if they have an application that goes to a full committee?
Like that, they do, yeah. That's the trouble. There's always the allegation it's their mates are getting them permission.
Okay.
That's the way they become in there.
All right.
I'm quite happy with it coming to the committee. I think it's transparent, and it probably ought to say reported to and determined by.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Okay. Right. Nick.
For Mark, a couple of questions on page 37 of the combined pack, Annex C. I think you're referencing an application for a major urban park. Can you tell us more about that? And also on Ebbsfleet Central, can you give us an update on section 106 and NHS contributions, which you touch on? That's on page 38. And then finally, the point about service charges and the minutes was 3.5, and actually it was Mark who was going to come back to John, having talked to the developers involved.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So the major open park falls within Eastern Quarry. So the major open park goes north to south between the villages of Alcadon and Ashmere. So Eastern Quarry overall provides just over a third of the site as open space. A lot of that is then provided through the major open park and through the Castle Hill Lakes. There's obviously a collection of other smaller pocket parks. So the major open park goes from the southern boundary between the lakes, and then it goes all the way up through into Cranham School, which so that then cuts up into Swanscombe and Greenhithe. If you look out the window, just behind the education campus, where the buildings are starting to go off the education campus, there's a chalk spine, and that is part of that feature. It's an important piece of open space. The vision that the developer has sort of means that it's quite hardworking. It has, informal spaces as well as more formal areas, opportunities for sort of sports pitches and sort of various lower things, sort of allotments and opportunities for sort of growing food and things like that. So generally, the conversations have been going really well. Feedback, I think the design from the designer forum was very positive. So
so is that
really good?
Is that literally the most major urban park that is going to be delivered?
I suppose we called it the major urban park because it was always called that in the planning permission that was granted back in 2007. So I suppose the name sort of carries on. arguably there are now larger pieces of open space, particularly in relation to the triple SI and areas like that. So, but it is definitely substantial.
And that, and the developer is held accountable.
It is, yes. The NHS and the Ebbsfleet Central. So yeah, various meetings are taking place in relation to the Section 106 sort of package, I suppose. And I don't really think of it as Section 106. I think of it as developer obligations, because obviously some of those will be contained through planning condition, as well as Section 106 is that the developer side of the EDC can then enter into with the councils, but they can't enter into with ourselves. So there's various things which will then be conditioned. From what I understand, we've obviously had concerns around the request from the NHS, and that's an ongoing conversation back and forth. We haven't got to an agreed position in terms of what's appropriate.
Can you tell us a little bit, just before John puts his tuppence in on the issue of Section 106, how the Section 106 to councils as opposed to the EDC, Ebbsfleet Development Corporation, Section 106, the responsibility for framing the packet, the planning packet?
Ultimately, the package will be obviously agreed by the EDC Planning Committee when that gets reported. We're generally working on the basis of anything within inside the red line boundary that can be provided within that can then be through a condition. Dartford also has a SIL, which also complicates things slightly, but various sort of services that will go to the councils, including Kent, things like potentially sort of environmental health issues around air quality, say, affordable housing provision, those things would then be contained within the Section 106. So there's been some mapping work done to understand different types of services, different types of obligations, who would then be responsible for delivering some of those obligations, and then how all of that package will come together. But then there would have to be, Section 106 is agreed with Dartford, Gresham and Kent, but obviously the Dartford element does have SIL. So then there's another component to that. The Dartford one is arguably potentially able to be stripped back more than the Gresham and Kent ones because Dartford has SIL.
All right, John. Yes.
Yeah, 106s. I understand totally why they're there, and I do remember the advice from a government planning senior planning officer when we set up the EDC here. Her guidance on 106 has been only required to offset any problems on the scheme itself. It wasn't a way of actually getting money out of a scheme, just pretty fancy. Now, if the scheme's got a design flaw or a planning flaw, then yes, 106 or a SIM. But my problem with the way it's been applied at the moment, certainly by our colleagues in Kent and the Health Authority and others, the police, they see that as and I've been in meetings where they've quite said it bluntly, is a revenue stream. Well, it's not a revenue stream. And as far as I'm concerned, on a planning application, if it's compliant in design terms and all the other regards, it doesn't need 106. It's great. Support it, get it behind it. It doesn't get 106. If it is absent in any element, it's that element that has to be made good, not money put for everything else. Now, to that end, what we're doing in Gresham is we're stopping Kent and others bidding for 106 money unless they can demonstrate how that absence is absent to the scheme or the area, and how it will be spent in Gresham. We've found money has gone to Dover from our 106, which I don't think is necessarily quite local to us. If anybody says it is, let's look at a map and see how long it takes to drive there. But the other thing is they've actually bid recently for money for a youth centre. They closed 12 years ago. Now, how's that right? It can't be right. So I think we need to challenge more of what you're getting in the way of demands from Kent and other agencies, but only apply it when it's actually required. That's my problem on 6. So we're putting everything back to the committee and the cabinet member to authorise everything. And if we're finding that anything hasn't been spent or has been spent, shall I say, illegally, we're going to be telling the developers they can claim against Kent. That's going down well with our finance team, I must admit.
All right,
Board, I think,
Daniel.
would say that what Councillor Burton has said, and Neil Cameron will know much better than I, is broadly a correct statement of the thought.
And if we were, as a board, ever to be thought, if it were ever thought of it, that we consider Section 106 money to be a random revenue stream, a sort of levy on development, unrelated to the particular development, the harms and the consequences of it, then we would be in a position where we could, in general, be legally challenged. So if you build housing, it's perfectly reasonable for the local authority, local educational authority, to require a contribution to a school that will cater for the children that are going to be living in that housing, might be an example, and so forth. But it can't simply be seen as a levy. Different considerations might apply in relation to community infrastructure levy and the infrastructure levy that is separate from community infrastructure levy that is contained in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, though that is not yet enacted. But certainly as far as Section 106 is concerned, we be very careful how we speak and how we conduct ourselves.
Neil.
What John and Daniel both been saying is reflected in the law. It's in the statutory instrument. We don't have any choice about this. It's in the snaply titled Regulation 1222 of the Community Infrastructure Levy Regulation. So, and any developer worth their salt will be fully aware of that. We'll be saying to Kent, it's not necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms and so on. It doesn't meet the regulation. So that is the position, and none of us can do anything about that. So I don't think that's an issue.
I was making a slightly different point, which is that I'm sure developers are quite canny, and I'm not concerned about developers. What I'm concerned about is our reputation of possible legal challenges to us, not from developers, but from people who have said, well, you are selling planning permissions, which we never, ever would do. We can never consider that revenue stream to be a payment for a planning permission.
And we would not request a planning obligation that did not comply with those requirements.
I'm sure.
I think it's the safety net. I mean, I think it's harder with community infrastructure levy, which is for Dartford to deal with, because there are no, one of the, in my view, defects with the system is that you can collect the levy, but there's no legal obligation which directs you as to how you are to use that levy. You have well, it's got to be on infrastructure, but there's a very wide discretion. So you can levy it in one part of Kent and use it in another, for example. Not the planning obligation, but the SIL. Anyway, we're getting into a more general debate.
We're getting into a general debate. Yes, John, quickly to you and then to Mark, just to close this one out. Don't spend too much time on this. John?
Just very quickly, I hear what you're saying about developers fighting back on it, but if you've laid out a load of money for the site and development costs and planning fees, architects fees and everything else, you want to get permission. And if that means you have to accept what you don't like, you take it, because you get your permission, you can get your bank loan to the next stage, and then the planners say you can challenge it. That's unfair pressure by planners on developers who have to fundle with this, whilst they're sitting around thinking about it for a month, 2 months, 4 months. It costs the developers money, and that's not right. That's not how planning should work. But that's why they give in and give you whatever you want, because it's cheaper. Now, I know you can challenge it on Section 73. I've been told by plans to get developers to challenge it that way, but that could invalidate the planning permission. So they rarely will go for that. They could go for another plan application at more cost to remove the condition and the SIL item as a legal argument. At least they've got then their permission on board. I do not like it when planners say they should take it because that's up to them. They can always challenge it and appeal. It costs money, and it's undue influence, and it's wrong.
John, thank you. Valerie, quickly.
Yes, I wanted to go back to the terms of reference, please. I don't understand why, the 500 word issue, why we would remove that when it only applies in the case of a planning committee meeting being held remotely. And under the terms of reference, it requires at least Neil or I to attend. Even looking at the number of rail strikes, it seems to me that it's something that we should leave into the tool, and it may or may not be required.
All right.
Lots there. Okay.
Okay. Look,
So
deal with the
in terms of
106
section
and then let's come back with the change. To the
I know, sorry, we're jumping around.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, yeah, please be assured, board, we are not asking for, contributions frivolously. In terms of, I think that there'll be a requirement to end up with some sort of section 106 on central. Obviously, we are trying to get as much on site, and obviously Jen's team is obviously wanting to have as much stuff on site, and certainly some of the KCC facilities we would prefer to have as provision rather than necessarily have that through contribution, and then there's a risk there. I agree. But obviously section 106 can also contain impacts on air quality management areas some distance away. Now, as a planning authority, we're not in control of being able to spend that. The developer isn't able to control that. That's why some of the environmental health elements have to go to the councils to then spend. Affordable housing is housing authority. The councils have a role to play around the delivery of that, around nominations, which is why there's elements of the 106s that I think will have to be there. But we are definitely committed to as much on-site delivery as we can, and we will try to control as much through condition as we can. Hopefully have the 106s as stripped back as we can. Every year we do have to bring an infrastructure funding statement to this board. That is programmed in for the next few months. That will clarify all the income that we've had, all the money that we're holding. We've also asked the question to Dartford, Gresham and Kent to have lists of everything that they're holding for the local area, just to see if there's any other pots of money that are being held by the authorities that aren't being spent. So support your help with that, John, because obviously we're hopefully getting some information from you.
That's a very important point there, Mark, because in my experience, can have significant amounts of funds which are being held and actually not put to use in the community. So we should be endeavouring to do that. So
that's nice and transparent. So that's fine. So
we come back on Valerie's point on.
There's also next point on service charges. So in terms of Valerie's point, I mean, I think when I was reviewing it, I sort of felt that it was just slightly unnecessary, but it doesn't cause a problem to have. So if the board feels that there's value in retaining it, we can do, but it doesn't.
We may need to see an advantage in excluding that as an option.
All right. Can I bring you in, Fred?
Yeah, I'd just like to think about that, if I may. I think one of the important features of requiring people to attend either in person or virtually is that you can ask them questions. A written statement doesn't give you that ability as a committee. It does seem to me that if you have the facility to attend virtually as well as in person, that deals with the issue that you're trying to address. I don't know whether I assume that the committee chair has discretion to accept a written submission.
Absolutely.
He or she thinks are appropriate, and I'd be happy with that in those exceptional circumstances where someone simply can't attend and can't find a representative, local elected representative, for instance, to attend.
We're slightly at cross purposes because my proposal was that in the event of the planning committee meeting being held remotely, this appears to say that we couldn't have a remote planning committee.
Oh no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It doesn't. Okay, in that case, it's understood. Sorry.
We can certainly still have a remote planning committee.
All right, that point's closed out.
Apologies.
Neil, given the point's gone away, do you need to speak on this again?
So two other things. So
your final point here.
In relation to, I think the question was in relation to Cable Wharf and maybe some information that you had from Chemo and provision of affordable housing. I think from what I recall the conversation, John. I did speak to Chemo and they did say they have appointed an affordable housing provider for the whole site now. So they may have had some problems originally, but they have got Town and Country, I think it is, operating down there, and they have taken the affordable for the whole of that site. So there hasn't been any other feedback recently around any other service charge issues. But obviously, if you hear anything else, let me know. And just finally, Simon, if I can, in terms of the public appointments team, it took the councils a couple of weeks to provide those nominations. I did actually have an email from them this morning, so they're definitely on the case. But obviously, if there is any delays next time, I'll let you know in the support. Moving that forward.
All right, great. And if we cover off the next point.
Yep. So service charges. Ebbsfleet Central Major Open Park. Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Okay. Neil, I see.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
one more bite. Yeah.
I think it would be wise and appropriate for me to say, as chair of the planning committee, that I would value the speedy appointment of the local authority representatives. So, and that can be recorded, and whether that helps or not, I don't know.
It's good to know. It's good to know. All right. Board, I think we've had a good discussion there. There's a decision required here is to approve the new planning committee terms of reference. Is everyone comfortable with those?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mark, for that update. That then brings us on to Kevin, Ebbsfleet Living. Kevin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just take the paper as read, but just pick out a few highlights over the last month. Caroline mentioned earlier that we are currently recruiting for new community board members. Just to reinforce on what Caroline said, this is going to be very much a resident member-led process. So the resident member is scrutinising applications and choosing the additional members. The recruitment will start this Friday and run for the month of next 4 weeks. Other sort of highlights over the month, obviously last month was the coronation. There was a number of events in Ebbsfleet, in particular the Springhead Park picnic, had over 300 residents attend, and that was actually run by residents as well, which was really, really encouraging, and a very successful event. EDC held a cultural showcase event, which was quite a highlight for our team over the last month. That brought together a lot of people from the cultural and creative industries to an event which included presentations from residents, artists and others who've been involved in our cultural journey over the last 5 years. At the conclusion of the event, we launched our cultural prospectus, which included a foreword from Simon and from Sir Nick Sirota. And Sir Nick was actually in attendance at the event and spoke very highly of the work we've done to date. Also, picking up on the social value discussion earlier, the report does have a interim report that our social value created this year in Ebbsfleet is 11.6 million. So this is the first time we've actually measured that, so it's a very encouraging figure. Most of that was from local jobs in terms of local economic value. As I said earlier, we will report for the full year in 6 months' time, including our 20 TOMs which are based in the social value portal. And as well as that, we will have a resident satisfaction survey and an outcomes framework. So those three things together are how we measure our impact overall. And in conclusion, really just looking to the future, to let board members know that on the 8th of July, we'll have our second Fusion Festival. If you recall, that was held last year at the opening of Platinum Jubilee Park. So we're going to repeat that this year in partnership with Cohesion Plus, and also to celebrate the NHS's 75th birthday, which will be at the same event. So happy to take any questions and anything else in the report.
Thank you, Kevin. Great report. Lots of good work going on as always. Any questions, observations, board?
John. Question Kevin will be expecting 3.16. As a local stakeholder, how do you anticipate tying in with the Borough Council and District Council Dartford?
The employability programme. We work very much in partnership with your colleagues, both Dartford and Gravesham, and all of the employability programmes. I think we have a monthly meeting with your communities colleagues. We share that work with them, share what we're doing them, and we're looking for opportunities of doing joint bids with them as well. Was there anything specific, John, you were?
Who are you meeting with, please?
So we meet with Jamie Izzard and Simon Hookway every month.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Perhaps just for myself, I attended the cultural showcase event. That was fantastic. Really job well done. What, apart from all the fantastic cultural contributions, what really struck me was the Jubilee Park and the bridge there. What a high quality public open space that was. Really outstanding. So talking about to Caroline's point, I think drone footage of all of that. It's really very nice development. You wouldn't have the slightest idea previously on our current website about the quality of what has been created here, but that really looked outstanding. So it was a great day, and it's good actually. Good look around that. Nick.
So a couple of points. Edible Ebbsfleet planters.
These are allotments, but the thought process that was coming to me was actually something which the chairman, who was the head of property at Sainsbury's, they did this incredible thing whereby every single Sainsbury's created had beehives. And so suddenly in various parts of the country you had remarkable linkages of beehives, yes. And
was one just at the end? Just our approach.
I'm just wondering whether we are actually, do we have a program that's coordinated already?
It's like a pre-planted beehive question.
Yeah, so edible Ebbsfleet, as we just sort of mentioned, that's the 10th site that we have now. There's edible Ebbsfleet sites in in Gravesham side and Dartford side. So Northfleet has edible Ebbsfleet there at Nobles Garden. We also have it in St Mary's and Queenhithe, Swanscombe Church, and all the primary schools now in the local area, the new and existing, all have now got an edible garden within them. So we're trying to create a network of sort of support across that. Later on this year, obviously, the first allotments are going to open with the Garden City Trust. They were inundated with interest for that. So there really does seem to be an interesting growing culture locally. The reason we founded Edible Ebbsfleet was because the area has almost the worst childhood obesity in the country. So we've been trying to encourage healthier eating, food growing from the outset. And that's why we've been sort of investing in schools to try and get people to kind of train through that. And one of the other things in the note, you'll see we're doing a partnership, trying to encourage parents to learn healthier cooking techniques and stuff as well through the school. So literally, it's a very serious issue we're trying to address, and this has been a way that we've tried to tackle it.
Great. I've seen the one down by the station wasn't
It's a bit
at its best. Didn't look very edible. I don't know what we can do about that.
Mary's actually meeting the station today to kind of discuss that with them, because the station manager was the person who wanted to put in originally, and it was very well looked after. The station manager's moved on, so we either want them to love it or we'll move it to somewhere else.
Yeah, not the greatest advert for the programme. Valerie, could I bring you in?
Yes, thank you. I think it's great, the work that we're doing, and I can see that we're really reaching out and trying to be incredibly inclusive, and the cultural showcase event is a classic of that. But what I'm also conscious of is that month after month we get reports of partnership working, particularly with the Baptist Church and the Salvation Army, which is wonderful. But I do wonder whether we can build a similar relationship and partnership working, for example, with a local mosque or a temple and so on, because over time it feels to me as if we don't have those same relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, interestingly, the local mosque had been making contact with us in the past month. Obviously, the reason we sort of mentioned the Baptist Church and Salvation Army is because they put pioneer ministers into the development, so obviously they're more active. But we have had discussions with the local mosque who are looking to.
I'm not suggesting for a moment we should stop it.
Yeah, no, as I say, but
it's just perception again, I guess.
We're a very diverse location compared to our surroundings.
I'm going to bring Simon in. Just one question, very quickly. So on the local partnership, the resident representative, how many vacancies are there?
There's no set limit, so we're trying to encourage significant new membership, particularly from areas that are not represented, like Springhead Park, Cable Wharf, and Ashmead, the places that are new in the last couple of years. So.
Right. Can we encourage people who are representatives of groups to create greater diversity within that?
We're actually a very diverse community board.
Okay, good. All right.
So we are quite very representative of the local area in terms of our membership.
Perfect. All right, good to check. Simon.
It was just, it's sort of bridges between Mark's report and Kevin's report, but I noticed that on Ebbsfleet Green that Redrow are not progressing developments in a timely manner. I'm not sure what additional leverage or pressure we can put on them to do that, to make sure that those allotments are brought forward in a timely way. And I was also going to ask about the emergence of this beehive halfway up the drive in terms of who's managing that as well.
I can answer. So, I mean, in terms of the Ebbsfleet Green allotments, I mean, we have written to them formally as planning authority to remind them of their section 106 trigger. We've obviously been liaising with them closely to encourage stuff to move forward. forward. Mark Patchett from the Ebbsfleet Garden City Trust, I think, is looking at a way that an element can be provided, and then something can open down there, even if everything can't open at the beginning. So we are doing what we can, but it is sort of leverage and influence, really. It feels a little bit heavy-handed to go in with an enforcement notice, but you know, I can do.
All right. So who have we written to there, Mark?
It's their main sort of site manager, project manager person.
I can escalate it.
Yeah, you can escalate it there to the managing director. So yeah.
Can we escalate it to?
Well, it'll be the regional.
Yeah, indeed.
Let's do that. Yeah, because they've got an obligation to deliver this. They're not in time with their obligation. Is that right?
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's.
Who is it? Simon.
On the bee, we do have an active bee program now. We're supporting both honeybees and bumblebees. There are two communities that aren't necessarily always living in harmony, so we have to be careful to support both of them. But yeah, we're working with a local beekeeper who will manage the beehive on the driveway, and we're looking for other locations to locate beehives aligned with the allotments as we roll out the allotment program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Excellent.
And there's also going to be a bee bus stops emerging in the local area as well. So with Kent County Council, they're introducing landscape into bus stops to encourage bee and pollination through those as well.
Great, good. So we're working with the local community to support these initiatives. That's great. All right. Thank you very much indeed. That's for
If anyone
noting.
wants a cultural perspective, I'll leave some on the table if anyone wants to take them.
Thank you, Kevin. That's great. All right, we're noting that. Thank you very much indeed. Then we're coming into our design management update. Simon.
Good afternoon, everybody. So taking the paper as read, if I could just highlight a few key points. So this paper is a paper we bring annually that provides an update on design performance of planning permissions granted over the preceding 12 months, the financial year, and also sets out our priorities for design management for the current year. Hopefully you will have noted there were 3 annexes attached to the paper. So the first annex provided hopefully a helpful reminder for those that haven't seen it before of our design management programme. The second annex provided detailed assessments of those planning permissions that were granted. We probably undertake more assessment than any other planning authority currently in the UK, using our own tools as well as national tools. And so those tools are quite useful in providing the evidence around design performance, and we can look back and see progress year on year around those. So hopefully you'll note that across design areas of master planning, street design, park design, architectural character, and housing quality, the relevant metrics have generally been met, and where they haven't been met, the paper sets out the reasons why and why it was granted, why those permissions were still granted permission. Just to note, at the last board meeting, I think Simon picked up the point around accessible homes and M4 Part 2. So I did include this year a detailed breakdown of accessible homes, and would note that we have seen year on year an increased number of accessible homes being delivered in the Garden City. The planning requirement only requires 20% of homes to be accessible. We're now achieving 40% across the whole Garden City, and in the last year we've got up to 67% of affordable homes. The paper also notes some emerging issues around the quality post-planning permission. So we've managed to achieve a lot in terms of improving the quality of schemes being granted permission, but in the construction phases and the construction packaging phases, there have been some emerging issues around degradation of design quality, and the paper notes a number of activities that we have already initiated, working closely with the planning team to try and address these, using the levers that we have available to us post-planning around conditions, policing and enforcement as well, and looking at other practices from the leading authorities in terms of how they're managing design quality post-permission. And then finally, the paper notes 3 key areas for this year: sustainable design, and we talked a lot about that at the last board meeting, accessible design, which I just talked about briefly, and then co-design as well, and encouraging our community to get more involved in the design, particularly of our parks and open spaces, which Mark talked about, the major urban park, which is something we're really involved with at the moment, as well as Ebbsfleet Central over the next 12 months, and making sure the community are fully involved in the area master plan and design coding of Ebbsfleet Central East.
Great, thank you, Simon. There's a lot in this paper. Neil?
There is a lot in this paper, and I think a lot of work's gone into it. So well done to Simon and his small team. 2 points I wanted to raise. First point is, I think we're quite right to focus on design guidance because it's very difficult for both developers and authorities to judge whether something is good design unless you put out clear design guidance. So I think you're right to focus on that. And I know it means a lot more work for you because once you put out the guidance, you have to check that people are adhering to it. But my view is you should keep up the good work there, and you are actually ahead, or we are actually ahead of where the government is encouraging people to go, the local design guides. So keep it up there, but a specific question at 3.6, this is dealing with post-planning permission and how do you ensure that good design is actually built out. And one of the things here, you trialing a mechanism to ensure that the architect or design team who put forward the application are involved in its implementation. I've come across this in being secured in planning applications, but it's quite difficult to do because developers are resistant to it because then their architect can hold them to ransom because it has to be that architect. So I think it can be done, but I think you probably have to do it through a planning obligation, and there has to be some, well, not quite arbitration, but there has to be some system where the architect can't hold them to ransom and they come back to us to approve an alternative architect. I think if you do that, it can work. And I noticed that the London Legacy Development Corporation are trying it, but it has been done. There've been some projects, I think, in the City of London where that's happened.
Thank you, Neil. Simon, can you comment on that?
I was going to comment on the safety of women and girls piece, where we've done some pioneering work around that at the LDC, and now got an award-winning scheme that we've introduced around the safety of women and girls, and that is now translating into design guidance, which the planning department are bringing forward on that. So I put you in contact with the right people necessarily at LDC around that. Right. There's some good learning that can be done in that space around that. And I agree that I don't know the details of the LDC aspect here, but there is a real challenge, I agree, around how you maintain the design quality right through to construction and implementation. It's not an easy field, Neil, as you've illustrated, in terms of making sure there's that continuity of thought and purpose going through, particularly where you've got large-scale developments and you're trying to hold the concept well throughout the various phases of delivery. So it needs to be an area of focus for us in terms of making sure that what comes through the planning committee is implemented in faithfully in terms of what we see on the ground.
Thank you, Simon. Valerie.
Thank you. On the same theme, you'll be glad to know this time. I absolutely agree with what colleagues are saying. And a device that we used recently, I've forgotten the scheme actually, do you recall? It had a very distinctive sort of cornice feature. And so we agreed that there would be a planning condition for that element to be brought back and be subject to further review. I mean, if there's a listed building, people will call back one-to-one details for doors and windows, for goodness sake. So I do think we could maybe use that as not a device, but as an effective tool to help manage the quality of design as it's ongoing. It's one of many things, but this is a very common problem. In terms of the amber on the street design, that was a bit disappointing, actually. I hadn't realised that had happened because presumably not only are we losing trees as a result of there being increased driveways and access, we're also gaining more cars that are visible within that streetscape, which is, I think, on the one hand, it's not very sustainable, and on the other, kind of contrary to an Ebbsfleet vision. So I do think that's something that we should really, really kind of manage.
Cars contrary to an Ebbsfleet vision.
Because Well, I'm still struggling with the Garden City issue, but actually, if we're removing cars to put in vehicle access and driveways, that to my mind is one, not terribly sustainable, and two, will deliver a less attractive streetscape.
I don't think we will absolutely very easily cars.
It's not a concern of without cars. We're not meeting, the developers aren't meeting our own standards in terms of the public realm strategy. And I think that is a loss to what we're trying to achieve.
All right, thank you, Valerie. Are there any further comments on this paper? All the excellent work that Simon and his team are doing. All right, thank you. That is to be noted, Simon. Thank you very much indeed. Then we're coming on to the next one. Director of Corporate Services, Gerard, can you take us through your finance operations and programme report?
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of you shows, is the first of this financial year. It shows the position after the first 2 months, so as at the end of 31st of May. You're being asked today to agree the 23-24 budget and approve a couple of policies, the updated probation policy and the updated scheme of delegations. In terms of the budget, looking at section 2, we've been given for our resource revenue funding 6 million allocation from the department, and we estimate that we will generate about 1.2 million of revenue RDEL receipts this year, giving us a gross total revenue budget of 7.2 million available for this year. We are at Annex A highlighting a small underspend against that for this year. That's basically due to the timing of recruitment, so we are generating some payroll savings, sort of offset by perhaps the use of temps or contractors, but the details are laid out on Annex A. On the capital allocation for this year, we've had as a result of the spending review submission, we've had a good allocation announced from the DLUC. We are using it as a baseline initial amount of capital of 10.55 as set out in table 1. That obviously leaves us an amount to be allocated, and as stated at 3.4, we are working on how that funding can be utilised in the spending review period to March 2025. We talked about the recruitment that's going on, and that's our detailed section 7. And then at section 8, which reflects on Annex B, we have got an updated probation policy, one of our HR policies. In line with our HR advisors, they have gone through and suggested a variety of tidy up and clarity issues that needed to be reflected in the policy. So those are detailed at the start of Annex B. So we're asking for to approve the updated policy on probation. And then on the scheme of delegation, slight tweak that is needs to be reflected in the following the conversation we had at ARAC this morning. At 9.3, ARAC were content with the revised presentation of who can approve and what information, so around purchase orders and invoices. But Fred, you might want to give a bit more detail on the recommendation from the new delegation to the Chief Executive to make minor alterations. ARAC felt that there should be a slight tweak to that wording.
Yes, thank you, Gerard.
Right.
The proposals everyone will have read is to allow the Chief Executive to make minor changes to policies, which seems terribly sensible. I think ARAC rather felt for the Chief Executive in these circumstances, because being clear as to what represents a minor change and what doesn't is not a science by any means. So we recommended that the Chief Executive gives notice of proposed changes to ARAC, which by default is approved, but ARAC has a chance to look at it and say, actually, not quite minor, we'd like to take a look at that. I don't expect there to be many of these changes in practice, frankly.
Right, sounds very sensible. Checks and balances. Thank you, Fred, for that. Gerard, I've just got a quick question. The inland border facility appears to be work going on in there. I don't know, when does the lease come to an end and what are they up to in there at the moment? And the second part of that is clearly when we no longer receive that revenue, the department is aware that there'll be a step up in our revenue funding as a consequence of no longer receiving that income.
Well, on the latter, no, they won't give us any more. We'll just have less receipts, so we'll have to manage that. If it will be below the assumption that we made originally, but not huge. We can cover it.
So at the moment, how the revenue we receive from that is
At 1.2 a year, is it?
Annually, we have built our budget for this year and next year, the assumption that because very helpfully the department have given us flexibility around receipts, the shortfall in receipts for next year with HMRC going, we can cover with receipts that we will be rolling forward. So we are content that for this year and for next year on the revenue side, despite HMRC going, and they're due to go within the next week or so. So it'll go back to being a car park at the station. We believe we can, have a sufficient budget to operate to the end of the spending review period. And then there will be a new spending review at some process when we will.
okay, because there is a cliff out there. There's a spending cliff out there, even if you're rolling forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that will be in the next spending period.
But it also does dovetail with our requirement for project programme feasibility activity to reduce quite significantly. So we would use the revenue that we've got available this year and next year to ensure the programme is more fully developed, so it doesn't require so much revenue. Then the revenue requirement for programme project feasibility would reduce as our revenue reduces, therefore we're delivering more capital.
So I'm hearing that you think there's an acceptable glide path.
Yes.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the receipt cliff is next month, and we've been working on the basis. The work that they are doing is the decommissioning. They had to restore it to the state it was in before they took it over. That was part of their lease. So they looked at it there an awful long time, and they're also tarmacking and doing whatever they done to restore it. So the sort of this year budget, but we're obviously looking now all the time at our 3-year SR budget plans, how it rolls forward, etc. And yeah, we're monitoring that, managing that. We think there is a line.
Okay, great. Remind me, is that in the triple SI?
The car park isn't.
Yeah, okay. I've just wandered past it and I thought it would be verging on the absurd there.
Well, it would have been.
Yeah,
indeed. But they didn't get quite that absurd.
Yeah. And so it comes back, then it's under our control.
No, it goes back to HS1.
Yeah.
It's under a long lease from DfT to HS1, so it goes back to an HS1 operating.
Still on freehold.
Yeah, still on freehold.
So the work that we, the board approved a project a few weeks back to start looking at what development capacity that car park would have.
Yeah.
And how we would work with the triple SI designation to deliver that.
Okay, so that's Ebbsfleet Central West.
Yes.
Okay, so just for completeness, we don't envisage anything happening within that area, even though it's going to be returned to car park. No one's going to park there, surely.
The opposite in my car. A few people used to park there, but it was not a particularly well utilised car park prior to HMRC taking occupation.
And it was the lower cost one.
It is also the lower cost car park, yeah.
And is it
prior to the others usually?
Is it like secure, so people can't just drive in and do donuts in?
Oh yeah, it's the same level of security as all the other car parks have. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Great. All right.
British Transport Police are also in occupation up there, so that is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for answering all those questions. You know what donuts are?
I know.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Any further questions on? Yes, Simon.
I just have one on having read through the probation policy. I've seen it before. I must say I was a little surprised that we have a standard 6-month probation period, which seems excessively long to have as a standard period. Certainly in organisations that I've worked in, the standard probation period is normally 3 months, but there's been the mechanism clearly as there is here to extend that if the staff's performance isn't satisfactory during that probation period. I was just interested as to why we've ended up having such a long probation period here.
It's probably historic,
Yeah, it's in the contracts now. I think it reflects this kind of civil service probation period, which is the historic reason for it.
standard every real estate firm that I've worked in, my friends. I'm working in 6 months.
It's just the sections I've worked in.
I'm comfortable to leave it where it is, to be honest.
All right, okay, Chief Executive's comfortable to leave it where it is. All right, any other questions on this? Otherwise, we have, subject to the ARAC, I think we have the scheme of delegations and also the updated probation policy, which we need to approve. They're the only two things we need to approve, Gerard. Yeah. Is everyone comfortable with those? Okay, great. All right. Good. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Gerard. Part 1, our development report. Jen, can we chat through this, please?
Of course, just a short update from me covering our sort of 3 main sites at the moment. So firstly, from an Ebbsfleet Central point of view, very much focused on the work around our first phase of development, which we call EC2. So those are the main car parks at A and B. So since appointing M3, we've now been focusing on working up the scopes of work to appoint the design team for the infrastructure works. So that's been looking across 6 different roles, which I think I outlined last month. And since then, we've issued expressions of interest onto a number of different frameworks. We've now received the results of those. We had a good response. So now we're going to be able to move to finalise that strategy for those appointments and get those live in the next month or month and a half or so, with the aim of having that design team on board in autumn, so that we can initiate that design process for that infrastructure package. From a Thames Way development area point of view, we're still in that work to reassess the options, but notably we've now sort of gone through with our project board a programme of further technical and commercial work that we are in the process of commissioning. That will be done through a mixture of both internal and external support, so using skills where we can internally, but bringing in those that we need to just do some high level further work on the emerging potential options before we bring that back to board for a discussion on the direction of travel.
When will that come back, Jim?
Obviously, we spoke about resourcing challenges earlier on today. I'm hoping it will come back in sort of autumn time, Simon, subject. We need to sort of do a first cut of some of this technical work to know if we need to ask extra questions and commission extra work. As everyone knows, particularly complex. So I want to make sure when we come back, we are in a position to have a meaningful discussion on the way forward. But I am hoping that what we've got as a package will be enough without going too far at this stage as instructed. So yeah, hopefully autumn time.
Great.
And then likewise at Grove Road, the master planning commercial consultants are well underway now there. Looking at the high-level options in a similar fashion, and that work should complete by them in early August, so a similar time frame into autumn to come back with our thoughts on the options up at Grove Road as well.
All right, thank you very much. Board, any comments, observations, questions? Yes, Nick.
So a couple of points. I'll do them all in one go. You have your 6 sort of design opportunity briefs, and these are for sector architects, or is it master plan, retail, residential? Is there a master planning champion that you're contemplating? Who is going to be responsible for knitting process together on Ebbsfleet in terms of the architecture? When we were talking about the video earlier, I ran out of time to talk about what are we thinking about promoting by way of video, and it's the right time of year to be getting fabulous photographs of what this place is, but who are we thinking about now in the context of Ebbsfleet Central about marketing the opportunity now? Because if you were going to get a government departmental, even though you don't have planning consent yet, you need to be out there with the marketing material, championing the opportunity. And I just don't think it's too early, and I'll be interested to know what your thoughts are and what your discussions with Addison Young are in relation to that. And yes, I think there's, and then I'd just like to have a little bit more than your masterful civil servant language with regards to Thamesway development area is the direction of travel.
Okay, so I think there's through 4 questions there, and I'll probably bring Caroline in on 1 if that's all right. So in terms of the 6 roles, these are very much the infrastructure design team. So we're talking our structural engineer, highways, transport engineer, architect, ME, HP, principal designer, landscape designer. They're the 6 roles. We have previously already done a procurement exercise to bring in the master planning work for the next stage. So we had contract to do the outline. They will finish when that process concludes with the planning. So we appointed Proctor Matthews, who will come in to lead on the site-wide master plan and the area master plan for Ebbsfleet Central East, and then act in that sort of almost design champion capacity to support that. M3 obviously will have a huge role in coordinating all of this as our development manager as well. So the 6 roles and the identification of those have very much been driven by M3 with their expertise. In terms of branding, that is an ongoing piece of work between M3 and ourselves, and I know Caroline is supporting the team on that a lot. That is something that they and us have recognised we need to get on board with now. So that sort of a strategy associated with that is now in development, and in terms of how that kickstarts, Caroline, please add to that in a second if you'd like to. And in terms of direction of travel, what I mean by that, Nick, is very much following all the work we have done and now knowing what we know in terms of all the constraints of Blue Lake. We're reappraising what the options are to bring forward that scheme in one or another, whether that is, as we previously showed, through a development platform, or alternative uses that may improve value for money, because that is obviously one of the main drivers for us. In order to do that, we need to do some more technical work before we're able to put sort of a proposal to the board around how we best think we can bring that forward. That's what I mean without being able to go into much more detail until we've completed that exercise. So yeah, Karen, I don't know if you wanted to come in on branding at all.
Yes, I won't bother coming back to the table, but just to echo what Jen said, we've had some introductory concept meetings with the Ebbsfleet Central team and M3, really starting to put meat on the bones as to what we want the structure of our marketing, the identity of Ebbsfleet Central to look like, and to respond flexibly as we continue work with the designers to make sure that it can carry us through the next years and remain consistent throughout all of our work streams. So you're absolutely right. It's not too early in the day, and just to reassure you, we've already started those exciting conversations, and we've started to put together.
It's a long time ago, but convince everybody that Wembley was a new location. Spent £100,000 on an amazing CGI flying around, contrasting what it was before, why it had failed, why there was nothing for the community from having a stadium. But this is what we're going to do to change it. And spent hours on the music, script, the voice, to actually sell the location. I sort of feel this is a huge stream of work that we should be contemplating. And of course, it's going to cost so much more now to do it. But if you were doing a 3 million square foot application, trying to get major relocations to get this thing going.
Yeah, look, anyway, just so new. So can I just see, there's a package of support that we received from Addison Young.
We draw down support as we require from Addison.
But my understanding was that that contract will come to a natural end point, and then there'll be a retendering.
That's good, yeah.
But obviously that has been moving out, I guess, from a timetable perspective, because Ebbsfleet Central East planning.
Planning and linked to the business cases.
When does something kick off around that? What's the trigger for all that? Either yourself, Jen, or you and Ian?
We'd need to be retendering it at the end of next year.
Yeah, end of 24.
Start the retender then.
Right.
But we draw down our support as we require from Addison Young. It's mainly on the commercial side, less on the, and I think the suggestion is we may well need to bring in something from a branding perspective completely separate to that. But we're very much open to looking at that at the moment. We have in the budget for this phase of works put in an allowance, reasonably healthy one, I believe, from memory, for this work. But yeah, I think we are very much on top of it, but we haven't got all the answers because we're still working out exactly what the form of that will look like. And we will bring in the relevant people and the right people to support us with that.
Because you can, mix and match and make sure a single body of work will actually be capable of being subdivided to work for several different audiences.
Can we, absolutely, Nick, can we perhaps draw this out a little bit in the next report?
Yeah.
Whether that's July or the one in September, and just
Can do, yeah.
Understand kind of as this evolves, as we get closer to a committee session on Ebbsfleet Central East and what that then triggers and timetable moving out. Is that okay?
Yep, I'll work with the team and July or September as resources. But we'll bring something out in the next couple of meetings time.
Great. Nick, is that okay? Yeah. All right. Good point. Well done. All right. Any other comments on Jen's update? Very excited about Thames Way and Grove Road and what's emerging there. It's a very long drum roll. Excited. All right, thank you very much. Paul, Infrastructure and Enabling Works report. Paul, welcome, as we've said.
Yes,
what have you got your teeth into?
Yes, I'm trying to get my teeth into all sorts at the moment, but I've just provided a sort of brief update on the things that I've kind of got a helicopter view on, so to speak, since I've been here. I won't go through verbatim, but I'll just cherry pick some of the sort of key items out of there. So Springhead Bridge, unfortunately, we're still waiting for the adoption papers to come through from KCC. I'm due to drop them an update letter tomorrow, hopefully trying to get them to provide the necessary documentation for us to then commission the principal inspection, which will then spring into the adoption. But until we get that principal inspection from, until we get the construction compliance from KCC, we can't initiate that inspection. So we're chasing that at the moment. I'm on the case with that. With regards to fast track tunnels, we're on the case with them providing the update to the business case. And we're hoping to bring that to full board in September. Likewise, with the electricity business case, we're in the process of updating that at the moment, and we're looking to bring that to board in October. So I'm working with my small team at the moment to get those completed. With regards to wastewater treatment works, another key sort of infrastructure part of our works, we're awaiting Southern Water's completed design and an initial cost assessment, which is due back end of September. And we are working with them in collaboration. Chris Beckett is on the case with that and looking at, again, updating our relevant business case as we go through that process. And with regards to the waste management project, we are working with KCC, who are reviewing an annex waste transfer station to their Pepper Hill development, where their the waste centre is currently there. So there's an annex to that which is currently being investigated for our waste transfer station. Happy to take any other questions that the board may have.
Paul, look, I know you're getting up to speed on all of this. There's a lot going on. Any questions? Yes, John.
The first one will obviously concern the wastewater treatment works. I think as it is in the EDC area, we do need to really be seen publicly to be putting some real pressure on Southern Water. The residents in Springhead are extremely upset at the moment. The smells that are coming from that wastewater treatment works, you need to go there to believe it. Unfortunately, it is in line with what, as an authority, we were expecting, because where the housing on third phase was built, that was meant to be industrial units and employment in the regional plans. I'm putting into housing, what you've done is put housing right next to the sewage works. And unfortunately, that particular sewage works, the reason why they have the significant outflow of smell is they use tankers to take some of the rubbish from there to the Northley, to the Gray's End site. And when they transfer from tanks into the tanker, it doesn't always go into the tanker. And also the smell then percolates. It's all in the open air. So the smell is horrendous. Residents are there really kicking off. So we need, I think, as an EDC, to be making some public noises that's not acceptable. Or we're going to be, as a board, really in trouble with the residents. To that end, I'm also taking it up with our environmental health team as to whether we can actually put some enforcement notices on them. We did something similar at Northfleet, Gravesend, when it happened from there. And they put perfume onto it, and it changed the smell. It wasn't great, but it was a different smell. But when you've worked near the Gravesend one as well, which I have done, in the summertime, you have to keep the windows and doors shut. Don't want visitors, because it means you open up the door to let them in, and everything came in with it. It knocks you back.
Okay, John.
Issue. Sorry.
Can I just ask, are you in contact with, it's Thames, isn't it? Southern Water, okay.
Yeah, Southern Water, yes, we are. We're chasing a response from Southern Water now in terms of the cause of the smell, and we're aware of the smell, John, because Ian forwarded me an email that was circulated, I think it was yesterday evening. So we're on the case of it. There's been a change of personnel at Southern Water, and we're trying to track down the relevant person, but Chris is on the case of it. So we should have an update within the next 24 hours.
Great, and it's, sorry, just...
You need to get into the media saying what you're doing,
okay.
Otherwise they will blame you for it.
All right, so the cause of the smell, is that something which is still contested? So I've experienced that before.
We're trying to find out whether there is anything specific that has changed, to cause these increased complaints. I mean, obviously it's been there for a long time. So we're trying to find out, see from Southern Water, there was one suggestion in an email that there was a sewage leak somewhere. I don't know whether that is related, so we're trying to find out whether there's anything specific going on. If there isn't anything specific and it's just the wastewater treatment smells, as John has sort of described, then we are working with them to long-term solutions to replace the existing facility. A lot of work still to do on that, of course, and a lot of investment needed.
We'd agreed to wrap it.
Yeah.
I thought we'd agreed to cover it.
Well, we haven't
I thought we made an agreement.
We haven't agreed anything. We haven't approved anything in terms of investment. So we're looking at.
No, but I thought we had a plan, which was that we could not relocate it because of.
Yeah. So there's and what the work that's going on now, as Paul said, is the Southern Water been doing the detail of what would that scheme look like.
Right, and so we haven't got a plan.
Yeah, there is a plan that we're developing to do it, but it's quite an expensive plan. So that will come in due course.
It's like £20 million to us, isn't it? Or more. Yeah. All right. So very, very quickly, Paul, I suppose when we know what is the cause of the smells and it's non-contested, perhaps from a communications perspective, we can be getting communication out to residents, as John says, so people understand there's an active dialogue going over there. There's been a determination of cause, and there's an action plan in order to address it. Because obviously, a complete quantum change is going to take years. A lot of public money to do that.
I think it's also important that we need to ensure that we're not seen as a responsible sort of body here. So there is, there are other agencies that are responsible for enforcing environmental issues. Environment Agency. I don't think this is a planning thing, is it, Mark? Or
the houses would be. So we inherit when we started. We inherited the master plan that had been previously agreed by Gratian, which is where the houses are where they are. So
but there's no planning controls over the wastewater treatment.
No, absolutely not.
That's a licensing issue.
So it's an environmental health issue with the local authority.
Yeah, which we're taking up.
Yeah. So do we go with the comms or do you go with the comms?
Well, we'll be doing something, but I'm here representing the EDC.
Right.
Not the authority. That's what I try and put different hats on. On that basis, EDC need to put a message out. You understand what the issues are, and you're trying to get involved and get on top of it. Or whilst it's not your responsibility, that would help because everybody's blaming EDC.
Perhaps we could put out a joint comms between.
Do that.
Yeah, you've got the environmental health angle on this,
and we're looking at the long-term solution.
Yeah, we're looking at the long-term solution, and then have communication plan with our comms colleagues at the local authority to give some reassurance and to our residents. That's great. All right. Fantastic, thank you.
Second item for me was, I'm fascinated by the waste management paragraph. Kent are in the process of closing their waste management facility at Dartford, as their proposal, whilst keeping the one open at Pepper Hill. That's being challenged by Dartford. And they've come up with a counter offer to keep Dartford open and Pepper Hill open, so that there will be one facility in every authority in Kent, which I think is quite reasonable. I'd agree with Dartford on that. But this seems quiet when it had the argument they really add capacity. Close one doesn't. The two things don't seem to make sense. If you're at capacity and you're closing it, with a view of opening up something else to accommodate the EDC, does smack of them saying, right, we're expand Pepper Hill to use EDC funding and money to make it happen. Whilst we then close Dartford that is at over capacity, but they're closing it because the paragraph is nonsensical. In planning terms, how we go for 106 money, going back to the earlier debate, I don't want to rehash that one. If you don't need it and you're closing it, why do you need more money to open up another one?
Well, should we, I mean, unpick that a little bit. I mean, I wasn't aware they were planning to close it off. For example, we have been pushing back, the board have pushed back previously and said, I think there's a case here for EDC investing in a waste management facility. This is when they were looking at alternative sites, which were in Dartford, and I think their preferred sites. They seem, I think what the paragraph is pointed to is they seem to have now been considering an alternative to the new facility that they were looking at, extending the Pepper Hill. So presumably they are looking at that from a value for money point of view, what makes best sense.
So I actually had a presentation on this on Monday afternoon. So I asked exactly the same question. What the waste transfer facilities that they're looking at is where the bin lorries go to then process the waste that's collected from people's doorsteps. The idea around closure in the media is around looking at closures around those facilities where people then go to those facilities to then drop off their waste. So it's almost catering for a different thing, which is the answer I was given when I asked exactly the same question. So yeah, what they're closing in or looking to close in Dartford isn't what they're looking. It isn't what they're saying that they have a resource capacity for.
Right. Do you mind if I come back?
Of course, yeah.
I know that Dartford and Gresham currently dispose their freighter waste for that very purpose already at Pepper Hill. That's where it already goes today. And when we've faced additional charges when they've closed Pepper Hill and they've just done it again for 5 weeks, our freighters have to drive off along the distance. They pay a subsidy for it to make up. So they're already using Pepper Hill for exactly the proposal they say they're going to use it for the EDC. There's nothing new. They're already doing it. So they don't need to expand something they've already got. What they're talking to is expanding an existing capacity whilst closing another one, which will make the problem worse. I think you need a bit more work on waste management.
Mark was saying what they're proposing to close is something more akin to a civic amenity site for residents to drop off refuse rather than a freighter transfer.
It is, Dartford is more that than it is Pepper Hill. Pepper Hill has a local community drop-off point as well. We have got up a ramp and dump it in. But I do know that we're going to get a lot more fly tipping on the back of it. Dartford are opposing it. I'm sure there's not getting segregation that you're going to expect to get.
I'm sure there's a reason why Dartford might want to oppose closing a civic amenity site in its area. I don't think what Mark is suggesting, that has no real connection to us or waste transfer.
A new site.
Yeah. So can we?
You need to understand issues.
Can we come back in the next report with a little bit more clarity about what's going on here? Yeah, Paul?
Yes.
That's great. Yeah, I think we also want to, if possible, discourage an environment which is encouraging fly tipping. That would just not be very good. Okay. So that's the report. That's for noting. Yeah, Nick, we're quite tight on time. Yeah. All right. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so that, thank you very much indeed, Paul. Thank you very much for that. I think that then brings us to the end of the public part of this board meeting. Again, we had an excellent set of questions which we will be putting written responses to out into the public domain. So I'd just like to take the opportunity of thanking everyone for joining us at this board meeting today, and look forward to you joining us again, either in person or watching it subsequent board meetings. Thank you very much indeed.